Welcome back to another explainer right here on Decode Healthcare with Herschel. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you with us today. So, in part 28, we broke down a really specific set of rules around documentation exceptions. We talked about exactly when it's okay to pull BMI or coma scale notes from clinicians other than the primary provider. If you missed that one, definitely go back and check it out. But today we are shifting gears. Our mission is absolute mastery of the CMS ICD-10-CM official guidelines, specifically Section IB-15 on syndromes. We're going to learn the exact official playbook for coding complex, multi-symptom name syndromes without getting completely lost in the weeds, or worse, making the fatal error of double coding incorrectly.
Okay, let's dive into our syllabus so we can get right to the point. We'll start by tackling the core problem of coding syndromes. Next, we're going to break down the two-step protocol. Step 1 is the index, and Step 2 is our manifestation backup method. Finally, we'll wrap the whole thing up by looking at the compliance risks and audit traps that catch so many coders off guard.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the core problem when dealing with multi-symptom diseases. Let's just frame the exact challenge we face on a daily basis. Imagine you're looking at a patient who presents with a dense, multi-symptom disease. A named syndrome isn't just one single issue. It's a whole collection of clinical signs and symptoms that define a specific condition. So I have to ask you, how do you actually code a complex syndrome without double coding? I want you to acknowledge that feeling of panic for just a second. You're staring at a chart for a rare genetic syndrome, and this patient has cardiac issues, skeletal deformities, and vision problems, all tied to this one single name. Do you code every single symptom? Do you just code the name? This is exactly where the confusion sets in, and it's precisely why the CMS official guidelines strictly override any textbook advice or personal guesswork here. Seriously, you don't have to guess. The guidelines give us a definitive, crystal clear path. And that path is the strict two-step syndrome protocol. I really want to empower you with this because having a sequential playbook basically takes away all the anxiety. First, you always check the alphabetic index for the specific syndrome name. If that doesn't pan out, you move straight to Step 2 and code the documented manifestations. It's a strict hierarchy, and following it to the letter is what keeps your claims clean and fully compliant.
Moving into Section 2, Step 1, the index, and why your search always begins here.
Listen, the absolute most critical rule in all of ICD-10-CM coding is that your search begins in the alphabetic index. Never go straight to the tabular list. So Step 1 is super simple. If the alphabetic index provides a direct specific code for the syndrome, you must use it. For instance, if you search for Down syndrome, the index directs you straight to Q90.9. That single code legally represents the entire collection of standard, inherent symptoms associated with Down syndrome. You absolutely do not go and separately code every single expected baseline symptom if you're using Q90.9. The code itself acts like a giant umbrella. Bottom line, if the code exists, you use it, and you stop double coding the routine signs and symptoms that are just naturally integral to that disease process. Now for Section 3, Step 2, the manifestation backup method, which is your go-to when the index turns up blank. So let's see how this builds when you hit a tricky scenario. What happens when a provider documents a really rare or obscure syndrome and your alphabetic index is totally blank, like there's just no dedicated code for it? Believe me, this happens way more often than you'd think, especially with newly named or highly specific genetic syndromes. Well, don't panic, and definitely don't guess. Here is the literal text straight from Section IB-15 of the CMS guidelines. In the absence of alphabetic index guidance, assign codes for the documented manifestations of the syndrome. That is your ultimate authority right there. If the index doesn't have the syndrome, CMS basically mandates that you pivot and code the physical manifestations, the actual individual clinical symptoms the patient is currently experiencing. So the really crucial takeaway here is that you are officially mandated to assign individual code blocks for the specific, distinct physical symptoms present in the record. If your patient has one of these blank index syndromes, but their chart clearly lists a heart anomaly, a vision defect, and a skeletal issue, you're going to light up and drop those 3 distinct symptom codes right onto your claim form. You code exactly what is documented, and you code what is currently presenting in the patient. It's really that straightforward. Wrapping things up with Section 4, compliance risks, and why you absolutely must beware of undercoding. We need to talk about a massive audit trap right now, one that could severely jeopardize your compliance. Look, just because you followed Step 1 or Step 2 to the letter, that doesn't mean your job is 100% done. You have to evaluate the nature of the symptoms, integral versus non-integral manifestations. Like I mentioned a minute ago, if a symptom is routinely expected and integral to the syndrome, and you have that umbrella syndrome code, you do not code the symptom separately, right? But the guidelines clearly state that additional codes for manifestations that are not an integral part of the disease process may be assigned when the condition doesn't have a unique code. Leaving an independent, non-integral complication off the claim completely masks the true severity of the patient's condition. If a patient with a specific syndrome develops a rare, severe complication that just isn't part of the standard baseline for that syndrome, you absolutely must code it separately. Failing to do so is straight up undercoding, and an auditor is going to flag that immediately. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into coding syndromes. Please make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and definitely share this explainer with your fellow coding students and professionals. It helps us out a ton. Next up is part 30, where we're going to tackle section IB 16, documentation of complications of care. We're going to learn the incredibly strict rules for distinguishing a routine, unexpected medical outcome from an official codable complication. Trust me, you will not want to miss it. I'm going to leave you with this thought today. Think back to the last time you coded a really complex multi-symptom case. If an auditor pulled that exact claim right now, would it survive the strict two-step by B15 protocol? Or would hidden, non-integral manifestations end up costing you your compliance? Keep that in mind the next time you open your codebook. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next explainer.